Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As we took in the first halaqah, the introduction to the book of Al-Arba'un al-Nawawi by Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, where he has compiled around 42 hadith from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam that is considered as the Mabani al-Islam wa Qawa'id al-Ahkam, the fundamentals of Deen and the fundamentals or the foundations of the fiqh rulings. And from that, the very first hadith that he starts with, likewise Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah and many other scholars, they start their book with this hadith. They start many of the books of hadith with this hadith that was narrated by Umar bin al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكهها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. This hadith we all know, and it is a hadith that is very common and very famous among our Muslim ummah, within our Muslim brothers and sisters. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that we all know it in English as every intention is judged by its actions. But that is not the actual meaning from this hadith, where in English it just sounds as, the deeds are judged by its intention. Yes, that is one of the meanings of the hadith, but there are so much into this hadith where Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he mentioned this as to be half of deen. He mentioned this hadith where Umar radiallahu anh, he narrated that he heard from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that every single action is based upon the intention that you keep. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى, as for every single human being, he gets what he intends for. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, the one who migrated, one who did hijrah for the sake of Allah and His Rasul, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, his reward will be from Allah and from Rasulullah. And he did it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, indeed his reward is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِلدُّنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِهُهَا, if his hijrah was just for the sake of dunya, to earn more, or he migrated to another place to earn more, or to marry a specific woman, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ, and he has migrated for the reason, for whatever he has migrated, and his ajr stops there. As long as he gains what he has gone for, his reward is stopped there, and there is no reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what he has done. And this hadith, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he mentions that this is half of deen. That from this hadith there are so many things that the scholars bring out. From that they bring out three main topics. The first one, that is iman. The second one, that is ikhlas. The third one, which is qasd. As for iman, we all know that is iman, or any deed, if you take in fiqh, for example, as-salah, if you take salah, or if you take zakat, or if you take sawm, the first shart, the first condition that is there in fiqh for that amal to be sahih, to be valid in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is al-Islam. That person has to be a Muslim. If a person, even if he gives the whole of earth in dhahab, in gold, and he does not have Islam, his reward or his deed is not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every single deed that is there, it is linked with iman, and the very first pillar of iman, that is al-iman billah. And we all know that the very first condition for every single amal that we have is that that person should fulfill the condition of Islam. If the condition of Islam is not fulfilled, that amal is not considered valid. Likewise, the second important topic that the scholars bring out of this is al-ikhlas, sincerity. As for sincerity, people could go wrong in two ways. One is ash-shirk al-asghar, where they are sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but out of, let's say for example, they had 100 reasons to do something, and from that 99 reasons was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one of them was because so and so, or maybe he could also benefit with such and such. Then he has committed here is what we call as shirk al-asghar. And one of them is a riya. That is, for example, someone comes up and does a deed so that the people, they could see him doing it. Like we all know that that person, he does not do it exactly for the people to see it, but what he does is he does it for the sake of Allah, but he also includes, he partners things with there that he did for the sake of Allah and for the sake of people. And when we partner things like this in our deed, there is no ajr. There is no ajr for that deed. As for example, the ruling of Riyah, and when it comes to salah or any other ibadah, there is no ajr for that person from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that does not make the amal invalid. It does not make the salah invalid, but there is no ajr, there is no reward for the person who has done this. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from shirk. The second type is the bigger type of shirk, which is he does the deed for the sake of someone else. That is where, for example, we give sadaqah because we just want to give sadaqah. We just feel like we want to give sadaqah, or we just want to feel some goodness in our heart, or we want to just do it so that we don't even remember of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here at all, but we just do it for the sake of doing it. And likewise, even if a person in his whole life he does 99 deeds which was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does one deed for the sake of someone else. For example, he does a dabiha, he slaughters for someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has done a major shirk here, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would remove the ajr or the reward of the entire other deeds that he has done. So these are things that we need to be very careful of. And the topic of ikhlas, the topic of sincerity, we all have to understand. When we do something, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing it for the sake of Allah, or are we doing it for the sake of someone? Or is it for so and so, or the reason is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is something that we always need to keep in check. As for the third lesson that we study from this hadith is al-qasd, that it is important we know what we are keeping our intention for. The only difference that you would find between Salat al-Dhuhr and Salat al-Asr is the niyyah. If you intended when you're praying Salat al-Dhuhr that you are praying Salat al-Asr, your salah is batil. If you intended in Salat al-Asr that you're praying Salat al-Dhuhr, your intention is batil. So your salah is batil. So likewise, if you keep the wrong intention in the wrong place, it's going to be invalid. So the qasd, the meaning or the reason why you're doing that in amal, you have to have the correct intention. There is no difference between the 2 rak'ah or the sunnah of fajr and the fard of fajr itself, except the niyyah, which is for sunnah we keep the niyyah that we are praying 2 rak'ah of sunnah before fajr, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us. And as for the fajr itself, we keep the niyyah that we are praying the fard salah of fajr, and this is something that differs between the sunnah and the fajr and the fard itself. But in terms of the whole amal, what we are doing there, it is exactly same. It is the 2 rak'ah and the 2 rak'ah. Likewise, the dhuhr is 4 rak'ah, the asr is 4 rak'ah. But what differs is the qasd itself. So likewise, this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, it affects so much of deen. There are so many things that comes in deen which is affected by this hadith. And that is the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah and many other scholars, they have mentioned that this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, is at least 1/3 of deen, or at least half of deen. And as for the hadith itself, if you would see the words of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he mentions إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, al-asl, when you speak Arabic, you say al-a'malu bin-niyat. When you say innama, you're exclusively, you're saying indeed the actions are by their intentions. So the actions, the ajr, or whatever actions you have done, whether you get adab for it, or whether you get ajr for it, whether you get punished or whether you get reward for it, is based on the intention why you do that deed. And that is why we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us sincerity, that we be sincere and we do deeds for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he used this word إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. He said innama. So that very clearly suggests, and it emphasizes on how much the niyat is important. In other riwayas you will find innama al-a'malu bin-niyyah. Likewise, if you would see what Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions as hijrah, the scholars have defined hijrah as many types. One of them is, doing migrating from Darul Kufr ila Darul Islam, from a place of shirk and kufr to the place of Islam. And another type of hijrah is coming out from dhulumat to nur, coming out from from sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to nur, that is the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we have such a successful life in ibadah, in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise in this hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he mentioned فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, he said, the one who did hijrah for the sake of Allah and His Rasul, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, and his hijrah, his migration is for the sake of Allah and His Rasul. But when he said, وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِهُهَا, he did not repeat the word. He did not say فهجرته إلى الدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها, but he said فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. يعني this is something, it is part of balagha in the Arabic language, where when it's something that is not of much emphasis or something that is you don't care about it much, يعني you say, for example, إذا فعلت شيئا, for example, if you want to say something good, you want to say, or you want to mention some good deed, you say and you mention it so clearly. But say, for example, you want to mention to someone, oh, if you do so and so, for you is likewise. You will say in Arabic, for example, what when you want to say, إذا فعلت شيئا فعليك بكذا أو فلك كذا, that we just, as if we are throwing it in the trash can, that it's of no use. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us sincerity. And we need to understand the importance of this hadith that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that he mentioned about the sincerity and the intentions. Without these intentions, none of our ibadah would be correct, and none of them would have been accepted in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us sincerity and to make our deeds accepted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to keep it for His sake.